When my parents left me at 13, I didn't cry. I just watched the front door close, felt the echo of their footsteps fade, and sat in the hallway pretending it didn't hurt. Maybe it was shock, or maybe I was already learning to survive on my own. I remember clutching my school bag like it was my only lifeline, wondering who would notice that I'd disappeared from their lives forever. I never imagined anyone would. I didn't know where to go, how to feel, or whom to trust. Everything I had known, the routines, the warmth of home, the laughter over dinner, was gone in a heartbeat. And in that silence, I realized I was completely alone. It wasn't long before my wealthy uncle, my father's older brother, found out what had happened. I remember his voice on the phone, gentle, steady, with just enough sternness to make me listen. "You're coming to live with me," he said. There was no argument, no discussion, just a promise, like someone handing me a lifeline I didn't even know I deserved. Arriving at his house felt like stepping into another world. Marble floors, bright chandeliers, and a kind of calm I had never known. But beneath the grandeur, I felt small, invisible. I wasn't used to being treated as someone who mattered. I wasn't sure I even knew how to accept care, love, or stability. My uncle didn't have children of his own, and I suppose that's why he welcomed me so openly. He never asked about my past, never pressured me for answers. He just fed me, clothed me, and made sure I had school books. The first night, I slept on a soft bed, listening to the faint ticking of a clock. For the first time in years, I didn't dream of running away. And yet, even in that safety, there was an unease I couldn't shake. I had been abandoned once. Could I be abandoned again? Could I really belong anywhere? I wondered if this feeling would ever leave me. Looking back now, I see that moment as the beginning of everything, the start of my new life, the fragile trust forming between a lonely 13-year-old and an uncle she barely knew. At that time, I had no idea that 15 years later, life would circle back in ways I couldn't imagine. That the very people I thought had protected me, the people I had learned to trust, might one day be the source of heartbreak I would never see coming. But for now, that first night, I closed my eyes in a stranger's house and felt hope. Tiny, fragile, but real. And somewhere deep inside, I promised myself that I would not let my past define me. Not completely. Living with my uncle was strange at first. Everything was so different from the small, cramped house I had grown up in. His home smelled faintly of lavender and polished wood. Sunlight streamed through tall windows, and there was always soft music playing somewhere in the background. I remember feeling like I didn't belong, like I was an intruder in a life that had already been perfectly arranged without me. But my uncle had a way of making me feel normal. He didn't fuss over me or treat me like a charity case. Instead, he included me in his quiet routines. We had breakfast together every morning, eggs, toast, fruit, and he would ask me about school, about my friends, about things I hadn't even told anyone before. He listened, truly listened. "Don't worry," he said one morning as I hesitated at the dining table, staring at my toast. "We'll figure this out. Together." His calm voice became my anchor. Slowly, I started to relax, to trust that I wasn't just a burden in someone else's life. I began to notice little things that made life feel normal. A cup of cocoa waiting for me when I came home from school, a note on my desk saying, "Good luck on your test today," or the gentle way he would say, "Dinner's ready," even if I was lost in my own thoughts. School was another adjustment. I was behind in some subjects, and I had no friends at first, but my uncle encouraged me. He hired a tutor, helped me organize my notes, and, most importantly, told me I could catch up. His faith in me gave me courage I didn't know I had. Evenings became my favorite time. I would sit by the large bay window, watching the rain hit the garden outside, feeling safe in a world that had once seemed so harsh. Sometimes my uncle would join me with a cup of tea, and we would sit in silence. No pressure, no questions, just presence. That quiet companionship slowly healed parts of me I hadn't realized were broken. Of course, it wasn't perfect. I still carried a quiet ache from being abandoned. Some nights I would cry softly under my blanket, afraid that this life of comfort could be ripped away at any moment. But my uncle never dismissed my feelings. He never told me to stop crying. He just let me feel. And in that space, I began to learn that it was okay to be vulnerable. Looking back, those early months were when I started to understand what family could really mean. Not just people who share your blood, but people who choose to care for you, protect you, and believe in you. My uncle gave me that. And little did I know, the lessons of trust and love I learned during those years would shape the choices I would have to make much later, in ways I could never predict. If you're enjoying this story and want to follow the journey, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to my channel. Your support helps me share more real-life stories that touch the heart. For a while, life with my uncle felt steady, almost like the world had finally slowed down enough for me to catch my breath. But as the months passed, I began to notice small cracks, not in him, but in myself. Living in a house so different from what I had known made me feel out of place, like I didn't fully belong. And sometimes I could see it in my uncle's eyes, the way he hesitated before speaking, unsure if he was doing enough to help me feel comfortable. School wasn't easy either. I had friends now, but there was always that quiet fear lingering inside me. The fear that someone would leave, that the life I had found could vanish, just like before. Sometimes I would snap at my tutor or retreat to my room for hours, feeling guilty afterward. Why can't I just be happy? I would whisper to myself, staring at the ceiling. It wasn't just the fear. It was the tension that grew slowly between us. My uncle tried to guide me, and sometimes his guidance felt like pressure. "You need to focus on your studies," he would say, and I could hear the concern, but all I felt was the weight of expectation. I didn't want to disappoint him, but I also didn't know how to navigate the emotions I was carrying from my past. One afternoon, I remember sitting in the garden, the sun warm on my shoulders, and he came out with 2 cups of tea. He handed one to me and smiled softly. "I know it's been a lot, but I promise we'll get through it." I wanted to believe him, but instead I felt tears prick my eyes. "I'm not used to any of this," I admitted quietly. "I don't even know how to trust that this is real." He nodded, and for a moment the tension lifted. But later that week, a small argument erupted over something trivial. My grades, my chores, even how I had arranged my room. I remember slamming my door and sitting on the bed, my heart pounding. I wanted to run away again, to feel in control of my own life the way I once had to, even though I was safe here. Those small fights became a rhythm of their own. I would retreat, he would worry, and then we would try again. And slowly I realized that growing up in this new world wasn't just about comfort or safety. It was about learning to navigate real relationships, to handle disagreement, and to trust someone enough to let them care. Even with these tensions, I loved my uncle deeply. I knew he wasn't trying to hurt me, but the fear of being abandoned had left a mark so deep that even love sometimes felt fragile. And I had no idea, as I wrestled with these small conflicts, that one day something far bigger would test our bond, something that would change both of our lives forever. I never expected that a single phone call could change everything. It was late evening, and I was curled up on my bed, trying to distract myself with a book. My uncle had stepped out for a meeting, leaving the house quiet, the kind of quiet that makes every small noise feel louder. Then, the phone rang. It was my father's voice. I froze. For years, I hadn't spoken to him, not since that day he and my mother left me alone at 13. And now, hearing him, I felt a storm of emotions: anger, confusion, and deep down, a faint hope that maybe, just maybe, there was a reason for everything. I want to see you," he said. His voice was shaky, almost apologetic. I could hear the hesitation in every word, the distance of someone who had missed years of my life. I didn't answer at first. My hands shook, and my chest felt tight. For a moment, I thought of my uncle, how he had raised me, how he had been my anchor. Could I betray him by answering this call? And yet, the longing to understand why my parents had abandoned me at 13 was stronger than anything I had felt in years. I don't know if I can," I whispered finally. The next few days were a blur of conflicting emotions. Part of me wanted closure, wanted answers. Another part was terrified of being hurt all over again. My uncle noticed something was wrong, though I tried to hide it. "Are you okay?" he asked gently one evening, sitting beside me in the living room. "You've been quiet all week." I looked at him, guilt twisting in my stomach. I just need to think," I said. But even as I said it, I knew he already understood. He always did. Finally, I agreed to meet my father. I remember that day clearly: the pale light, the anxious flutter in my stomach, the way my hands wouldn't stop shaking. When I saw him, he looked smaller somehow, fragile, not the figure I had once feared or hoped for. He explained, in halting words, that life had been complicated, that they had made mistakes they could never undo. I listened quietly, trying not to cry, trying to absorb the words that had been missing for over a decade. And in that moment, I realized something painful but true. The past could never be undone, but I could choose how it shaped me. Walking back to my uncle's house that evening, I felt a weight lift, and yet a deeper understanding settle. The bond I shared with my uncle wasn't just about care or wealth. It was about trust, forgiveness, and quiet, enduring love. And I knew, without a doubt, that the choices I had made and the people who had been there for me would always matter more than the past I couldn't change. If you're moved by this story and want to see how my journey unfolds, make sure to like, share, and subscribe to my channel. Your support helps me bring more heartfelt, real-life stories to life. After that meeting with my father, life felt different, but not immediately easier. Returning to my uncle's house, I noticed things I had taken for granted before: the quiet hum of the refrigerator, the sunlight spilling across the living room floor, the way he always left a cup of tea ready for me. These small gestures suddenly carried a weight I hadn't realized before. They were reminders of a love that had stayed consistent when others had faltered. In the days that followed, I began to process everything: the anger, the pain, the questions that had haunted me for years. I realized that my parents' absence had shaped me in ways I couldn't change, but it didn't define me entirely. What mattered most was the life I had built with my uncle, the trust we had formed, and the quiet love that had kept me safe. One evening, we sat together in the garden, watching the sun dip below the horizon. He didn't ask about my father, didn't push me to explain what I felt. He simply handed me a blanket and said, "You've grown so much. I'm proud of you." And for the first time in a long time, I let myself cry, not out of fear or pain, but out of relief. Relief that someone had stayed, that I was not alone, and that I had the chance to heal. Over time, I learned to forgive, not just my parents, but myself as well. I had blamed myself for their absence, wondered if I had done something wrong to deserve it. But slowly, I understood that their choices were theirs alone, and my responsibility was to live my life fully, with the love I had been given. I also started to notice how much my uncle had taught me without saying a word. Patience, compassion, the importance of trust. Even in moments of conflict, he had never let me feel unworthy or unloved. I realized that family isn't just about blood. It's about who shows up, who stays, and who chooses to love unconditionally. I even began to rebuild a cautious relationship with my father, not out of obligation, but out of understanding. I listened, asked questions, and found small moments of connection. And through it all, I kept returning to the anchor that had always been there, my uncle. His steady presence reminded me that love could be quiet, consistent, and unwavering. And so life settled into a new rhythm. The fear of being abandoned didn't vanish overnight, but it became easier to carry. I had learned that healing takes time, and that trust is built slowly, in moments of care and patience. And most importantly, I had learned that even when the past is painful, the present can be full of hope and warmth if you let it. Years passed, and I grew into the woman I had always hoped I could become. Looking back, I realized that everything I had experienced, the abandonment, the fear, the small daily struggles, had shaped me in ways I couldn't have understood as a child. But more importantly, it had shown me the power of love that chooses to stay, even when it's hard. Living with my uncle taught me patience, resilience, and the quiet strength that comes from being cared for without conditions. I learned that family isn't only about shared bloodlines. It's about people who make the effort to understand you, to support you, and to love you, even when you're at your most vulnerable. Every time I walked through his house, every time I sat at the kitchen table, sipping tea, I felt the warmth of a home built on trust and compassion. And yet, the lessons weren't always easy. I had moments of doubt, times when I questioned whether I was deserving of this love, whether I could ever truly let go of the hurt from my past. But my uncle never forced answers out of me. He simply reminded me, day after day, that I mattered, that I was safe, and that I could take the time I needed to heal. One quiet evening, I found myself sitting on the porch, watching the rain fall softly across the garden. I realized that I had come to a place I never imagined I would reach at 13. Peace, not the absence of pain, but the presence of understanding. I could forgive my parents without forgetting. I could hold on to the love my uncle gave me while also building my own life, my own choices, my own path. I also recognized how much I had changed. I was no longer the frightened girl who clung to her school bag in an empty hallway. I had grown into someone who could feel, who could trust, and who could hope again. And in that growth, I discovered something else: the strength to one day forgive myself for the fears and mistakes I had carried for so long. As I sat there, listening to the rain, I whispered to myself, life isn't always fair, but love can be the thing that carries you through. And it did. My uncle had carried me when I couldn't stand, and in return, I learned how to carry myself and others with compassion and care. If you've been touched by this story and want to follow the journey of real-life experiences and heartfelt lessons, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to my channel. Your support helps me share more stories of hope, love, and resilience with people all over the world. As I grew older, I began to think about the future in ways I never had before. When I was 13, the future had felt uncertain and frightening, a place where I had no control and no one to rely on. But now, after years of guidance, love, and patience from my uncle, I felt a quiet confidence. I knew that life would always have its challenges, but I also knew that I had learned how to face them and that I had a safe place to come back to. I started making plans for my life: college, a career, friendships, even dreams I had once thought impossible. But even as I looked forward, I never forgot the lessons of the past. I carried them with me like a compass, reminding me of what truly mattered: kindness, patience, and the courage to trust people again. I had been given a second chance at family, and I wanted to honor that by living fully, with love and gratitude in every choice. Sometimes I would catch myself smiling at the little things: the aroma of fresh bread in the kitchen, my uncle humming softly as he tidied up, the way sunlight lit up the living room in the afternoon. These moments reminded me that life's beauty often comes quietly, without fanfare. And I understood that even when life is unpredictable, love and consistency are the anchors that make it meaningful. I also started to think about relationships beyond my uncle and my parents. I realized that trust isn't easy, and building it takes patience and care. I was more careful with my heart now, but I also knew that closing myself off completely would only repeat the patterns of fear and loneliness I had once lived with. So, slowly, I allowed myself to form new friendships, to connect with people genuinely, and to open up to the possibility of love. One afternoon, while helping my uncle in the garden, I paused and said, I think I finally understand what family really means." He smiled, wiping his hands on a towel. "And what's that?" "It's not just about being related, it's about showing up. It's about staying, even when it's hard. It's about love that doesn't give up." He nodded quietly, and for a moment there were no words, just the soft rustle of leaves in the wind, the distant hum of life moving forward, steady and comforting. Looking ahead, I felt hope, not the fragile kind I had known as a child, but a stronger, more certain hope. I knew that life wouldn't always be perfect, that challenges would come, and that people might disappoint me again. But I also knew that the lessons I had learned and the love I had been given would guide me through any storm. And that realization gave me a sense of peace I had never thought possible. Looking back on everything, I realize how far I've come. From that scared 13-year-old sitting alone in a hallway after my parents abandoned me, to the woman I am today, life has taught me lessons I could never have learned any other way. And through it all, one truth has stood out. Love isn't just a feeling. It's the choice to stay, to care, and to believe in someone even when life is messy. My uncle showed me that every day. His quiet guidance, his patience, his willingness to see me through my fears, it all became the foundation for who I am. I learned that family isn't always about biology. Sometimes family is the person who chooses to be there, who chooses to protect you, and who chooses to help you grow when the world has turned its back. I've also learned that forgiveness isn't about forgetting. It's about freeing yourself from the weight of the past. I forgave my parents not because what they did was okay, but because holding on to anger would have only hurt me. And in forgiving, I found peace. I found the ability to love fully, without carrying the fear of abandonment like a shadow behind me. Life isn't perfect. Challenges still come, and people still make mistakes. But now, I meet each day with hope and understanding. I know that the bonds I build, the kindness I show, and the love I give are what matter most. I've learned to trust again, to open my heart carefully but completely, and to embrace the beauty of the present moment. Sometimes, when I sit quietly in the house my uncle built me into, watching the sunlight play across the walls, I think about that scared girl I once was, and I whisper to her, "You are safe now, you are loved, and it's okay to hope." Those words, once impossible to imagine, have become my reality. If there's one thing I want anyone listening to remember, it's this: life may not always go the way we expect. People may leave, choices may hurt us, and the world can feel unfair. But love that stays, that listens, that believes in you, can heal the deepest wounds. And sometimes the people who truly matter are the ones who quietly choose to be there no matter what. Thank you for joining me on this journey. If this story touched your heart, please like, share, and subscribe to my channel. Your support helps me continue to share real-life stories of hope, love, and resilience that inspire and connect us all.